Welcome, Wargamers, to a discussion that I've wanted to have for quite some time because we're talking about the duardin god of the Forge, Grugni. Now, like I said, I wanted to chat about him for some time, but there just wasn't a ton of, real information out there. We know bits and pieces of his story, and when you put it all together, it actually turns out to be exceptionally cool, with just enough unanswered questions to make him one of the more interesting gods in the pantheon of Order. So let's delve into his history and all the exploits of Grugni. He is one of two duardin gods that made his way into Age of Sigmar. His brother, Grimnir, being the deity and kind of icon of worship of his children, the Fire Slayers. Now I want to make here very clear that any duardin, and even non-duardin if they want to, can revere both Grimnir and Grugni. It's not like a one or the other thing. It's just that the Fire Slayers solely focus on one, so that's not representative of all duardin kind. But the tale of these two begins as far back as the Age of Myth, as Sigmar was going around and discovering the realms for the first time. He found the two duardin gods chained together far atop a mountain peak that pierced the heavens. Now there's a rumor that Grugni was the one who forged this chain, but nothing is confirmed. How and why they ended up trapped there is never revealed. When Sigmar released them, they owed him a debt, and the oath-bound nature of both duardin saw to it that this debt would be repaid in full. Grimnir wanted to pay his debt by fighting a worthy creature for the God King, and that's detailed in the Fire Slayer mythos, so I'll point you towards that. Go check out the Fire Slayer playlist I made to learn more about him. But we're going to stay on track with Grugni here. So Grugni, being far more patient than his brother, offered his incredible skills as a blacksmith, that is forge master, engineer, and architect to Sigmar. He built the first weapons that helped the primitive tribes of man secure a place to kind of prosper in the earliest days of the realms. He gifted knowledge of metallurgy, smithing, weapon and tool crafting, and more. And this outpouring of knowledge and skills was not limited to Sigmar's people. Upon finding more duardin across the realms, specifically in the realm of metal, Chamon, Grugni was overjoyed to pass his blessings off to his own people. He taught them technological wonders, or how to build these intricate defensive structures, and blessed them until their empire matched the dwarven holds from an ancient age. Metals, jewels, realm stone, there was nothing that Grugni could not craft with this godlike precision and excellence. And during the Age of Myth, he did as much as any god in the pantheon to push the bounds of what mortal hands could do. He just kept teaching, sharing, and passing on everything he could. Any smith with the strength and stamina to stand in the forge of a god would receive a personal blessing from Grugni. But like all loving parents, there's a time when your children have to learn how to take care of themselves, right? Pushing the bird out of the nest kind of thing. Grugni had it in his mind that after he had fully established the duardin people across the realms, well, it would generally, leave them be for a little bit, right? Take the training wheels off to really let them flourish on their own might. He knows more than anyone that the duardin are a proud people, so this opportunity to stand alone was understood by both parties as being important. Sadly, though, he may have gone a bit too far in his hands-off approach. As the Age of Chaos began, the God of the Forge remained painfully silent, even though his people were crying out to him. But he was resolute. They had to learn how to fight this evil as his ancestors had done for centuries in the old world. But the armies of chaos were insidious and nearly unstoppable, and the children of Grugni and Grimnir were tested as never before. Hundreds of immaculate holds and fortresses and keeps fell, their inhabitants slayed to the last duardin. Those that did survive did so on the brink of annihilation. The fathers of many keeps, saw that Grugni would offer them no aid, and so they fled to Azir, hoping to keep at least some piece of their race alive. Others, having innovated upon God-given gifts, fled on their own. Most famously, this is the origin of the Caradhran overlords. The aftermath of this Age of Chaos was devastating to the worship of Grugni. While he still has some followers, these are mostly limited to craftsmen and smiths, right? As many duardin rightly saw that it was Sigmar that answered their prayers for help, not Grugni. The Kharadron overlords have an intense disdain for Grugni, more than just apathy, but a real hatred, even more so, because in their mind, their god abandoned them. And for them specifically, none of the gods came to help, which what used to be Grugni's prized children have rejected them in any deity because they've become this people scorned. Perhaps looking to make up for his own inaction, Grugni agreed to help Sigmar with an incredibly ambitious project, the Stormcast Eternal. He crafted Sigmarite, he learned how to forge a soul and turn them into a unified weapon, a demigod to stand against the forces of chaos. Grugni and his team of 6 smiths, demigod craftsmen imbued with the Forge God's power, worked tirelessly until Sigmar had his weapon of vengeance and reclamation ready. Once the Stormcast Eternal project, I guess you could call it, was completed, meaning it was, self-sustaining, that they had a full army, they could go down and then be reborn and reforged and that kind of thing, Grugni kind of fell away, or at least he largely stayed out of the spotlight. There are all these kinds of rumors around him saying that he's collecting weapons and artifacts from all over the realms, like slowly planning this revival of his people, often called the Dispossessed. And there's actually some evidence of this. The novel 8 Lamentations, Spear of Shadows, and its sequels all put Grugni sending mortals to reclaim weapons of unimaginable power and rarity. His purpose in reclaiming these artifacts is unknown, but the Smith God is nothing if not deliberate. And moving away from the more crunchy facts that we have about Grugni, I want to talk about his appearance, because it's actually one of my favorite things about the book Spear of Shadows. And it's possibly my favorite scene of any Black Library book, because I love when they take a moment to really articulate what, the Black Library books don't get very flowery with their descriptive language, but when they do with Sigmar in Soul Wars and Grugni in Spear of Shadows, they're beautiful descriptions of these ethereal beings, right? Because the way it's detailed is he's a duardin, but he's the size of an ogre, right? So think he's 7 to 8 feet tall, but he's still the same proportions, so he's like this gigantic squat meatball. His eyes glow an intense red, reminiscent of the fires of his forge. His beard is made of smoke, with long strands being nothing more than wisps, yet thick enough to cover him in a dark shroud. His back is bent slightly from centuries bending over his forge. An eternity of labor and effort mark his skin and weigh upon him. And while his followers are now few and far between, the presence and power of this duardin god are a thing to behold. Now, I mentioned before that I really wanted to talk about him. Why did I want to talk about him so much? Well, he's an interesting thing. I feel like he was one of the first characters in Age of Sigmar that we really got evidence that the gods are super fallible. Right, before Deepkin and Teclis and making a bad batch of elves, basically, we had him who his inaction directly, created as an offshoot the lore of the Kharadron overlords. That is to say that they hate him so stinking much that they reject gods and authority above their own code. So it's not the usual Stormcast love Sigmar because he made them Stormcast and they're faithful and all this stuff. This is his presence in the lore as a negative effect created a new faction, even though they're still good guys technically. I just find that really interesting. I'd love to see some kind of automata or something like that, something that really plays up how extravagant his creations can be. We saw some of it in the Realmgate Wars. There was a clockwork style fortress, I believe it was in the Realm of Metal, that was just super cool by its description. And on that note, we do see evidence of his, master skill all over the realms. The fact that people have such advanced technology. He formed the way that if you look at in the core rulebook, Chaman, that entry for that, the continent that they share for that in terms of a map, he formed those islands, even though they've been twisted by Tzeentch since. He basically used to be this super cool, caring parent, but he just lost his way. He let his hand go too far off the wheel, and things just didn't end great, right? He's a great craftsman, not a great parent, not a great god. But I love the idea of some of these gods having remorse, right? I need to make this right. I would love, honestly, for a battle tome to come out. I don't really care what models they use, of just Grugni trying to right his wrongs, because I think that's a very compelling thing. Even with Teclis and like the Idoneth Deepkin, he's not trying to right a wrong. He wanted to kill them. He wanted them to go away, because he's arrogant and he's a tool. That's just what Teclis is. I'm sorry if he's your favorite. He was my favorite for a long time. But you know what I mean? Where it's like there's no remorse in that. But I would love to see like, a god over his people, who's very much like a father-son relationship, or I guess father and child, son doesn't matter, but he tried to do the right thing by letting them stand on their own, but he went too far, and now he wants, recompense. He wants to make it right. He wants to rebuild, and I would love that narrative. I would think that would be really cool, especially if you pair that with the cold, uncaring nature of technology and the things that they're building. And I like that he is reclusive, but not in the same way that Alariel was. Right, so when Alariel got depressed and went into her winter aspect or mode or whatever, she went and hid and just kind of sulked for a long time, a good portion of the Age of Chaos, whereas Grugni, he also bore an emotional burden, but he put that into craftsmanship. He made the process that we have for Stormcast Eternals. He's doing things in the background. So he is, like I said, reclusive, but he's not inactive, right? He's not like full of sorrow to the point where he can't do anything. He still contributes, although in little ways, or big ways that just aren't really seen. So friends, tell me what you would like to see of an army based around Grugni. I would absolutely love to see like a clockwork style army that includes a lot of the duardin kits that we have available in the Dispossessed section. That's my personal game that I would love to see, but I want to hear your thoughts as well. So go ahead and leave the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.